If there's one thing country music never lacked, it's pain. And these legends didn't just sing about it, they drank it straight. Behind the rhinestones and radio hits were bottles tucked in guitar cases, bloodshot eyes on stage, and voices slurring before the encore. Some drank to kill the loneliness. Others drank to chase demons that fame only made louder. And a few drank until they dropped. Their stories weren't just tragic. They were self-written obituaries, soaked in bourbon, gin, and the kind of heartbreak Nashville never put on record. From quiet drunks who faded in motel rooms, to outlaws who burned down studios and shot their way into headlines, this is the dark side of country's golden age. And while some found redemption, most never made it past their last drink. Here are the 20 worst alcoholics in old country music history, ranked from bad to devastating. Number 20 will break your heart. Number 1. It'll haunt you. Number 20. Naomi Judd. The smile that hid the storm. Naomi Judd looked like she had it all. The voice, the awards, the spotlight. But behind the red hair and glowing stage lights was a woman slowly breaking apart. Even at the height of the Judd's success, she was drinking to silence the thoughts in her head. A little wine to sleep. A little more to stop the noise. Then she'd wake up and start all over again. She once said it felt like her brain was trying to kill her. Depression wrapped itself around her, and the bottle became a shield. She didn't drink to celebrate. She drank to escape. While the crowd cheered, she was quietly drowning. Later in life, she opened up about her struggle, hoping to save others. And she did. Her honesty gave people hope, but it couldn't save her. Because success doesn't protect you from pain. Sometimes, it just gives you a nicer place to hide it. And the next name on our list? He smiled through the pain too. But his smile reeked of bourbon, and his survival came at a cost. Number 19. Billy Walker. The tall Texan who drowned in silence. They called him the Tall Texan, but no amount of height could keep Billy Walker from sinking into the bottle. He started drinking in the 1950s, back when honky-tonks were filled with neon lights, smoky bars, and endless miles of lonely highway. A drink after the show turned into two before it. Before long, the man who sang Heartbreak started living it. People remembered the smell of bourbon when he walked into recording sessions. His voice? Rough, raw, and strangely perfect for the kind of songs that made your chest ache. But there was something deeper hiding behind that sound. In 1963, he survived the plane crash that killed Patsy Cline. And something inside him never came back. Instead of putting down the bottle, he held onto it tighter. Maybe it was survivor's guilt. Maybe it was the only way he knew how to feel nothing at all. Years later, he admitted it. I was tired of waking up halfway dead. Sobriety didn't make him famous again, but it gave him a few more years to regret the damage done. Up next is a man who didn't just drink to feel nothing. He drank to write the truth. And he wrote it one bottle at a time. Number 18. Tom T. Hall. The storyteller who poured bourbon on every lyric. Tom T. Hall didn't just write songs. He bled them out, slow and steady, like the bourbon he always kept by his side. Fans called him the storyteller, but behind the clever verses and acoustic charm was a man drinking truth straight from the bottle. He'd sit alone for hours, a glass in one hand, pen in the other, writing pain like it was sitting across from him at the table. He once confessed that he could finish an entire bottle while writing a single song. He didn't see alcohol as a problem. He saw it as fuel. Fuel for truth, he called it. But truth soaked in that much liquor burns everything. Your friends, your family, your sense of time. By the late 1970s, his drinking wasn't a ritual anymore. It was a constant. Friends stopped visiting. Fans noticed the spark fading from his eyes. And yet the songs kept coming. Just as beautiful, just as broken. Tom never made the tabloids for public meltdowns or arrests. His self-destruction was quiet, almost poetic. But make no mistake, the bottle took as much from him as it gave. Next is a legend who didn't just influence country music, he invented it. And he did it while drowning in moonshine and dying before his time. Number 17. Jimmie Rodgers, the father of country music, and a slave to the bottle. Before Nashville had a sound or an identity, it had Jimmie Rodgers, the man who started it all. But while he built the foundation of country music, he was crumbling inside. In the 1920s, Rogers wasn't just a pioneer. He was a walking contradiction. Tuberculosis was slowly killing him, but he drank moonshine like he was invincible. He'd show up to shows already lit, stumble through sets and charm crowds with a grin that masked the coughing fits and the creeping shadow of death. Whiskey became his medicine. Every cough, every ache, every fear, drowned in another swig. He said it made the pain easier, but it also made the end arrive faster. When he died at just 35 years old, they said he recorded his final songs propped up on pillows, barely able to breathe, still drinking between takes. Not because he wanted to, because he didn't know how to stop. He wasn't just the father of country music. He was the first to show that the music would always come with a price. And for some, that price was everything. And his legacy didn't stop there. Because the next man, he inherited the fame and the curse. Number 16. Hank Williams Jr., the son who inherited a legacy and a bottled. Being Hank Williams Jr. meant two things. You had the voice of a legend and the demons to match. From the moment he could hold a mic, the world expected him to carry on his father's legacy. But what he really carried was a bottle of Jack Daniels in each hand before he was even old enough to drive. By 14, he was already drinking like a man twice his age. By 20, he was downing bottles before sound check and polishing off another before midnight. The fame came fast, and so did the destruction. Fans saw the stage swagger, the outlaw image, the sunglasses, but behind those shades was a man unraveling, trying to drown the ghost of his father before it drowned him. Then came 1975, a fall, not metaphorical, but 500 feet off a Montana mountain. His skull shattered, his face crushed. Doctors said he wouldn't live, but he did. And when he came back, he didn't just return to the music, he returned to the bottle. Except now, it wasn't for fun, it was for survival. The whiskey numbed the pain, not just in his bones, but in his identity. For years he wore the sunglasses to hide the damage, but really they were hiding everything. It would take decades before Hank Jr. found his balance, and even then, the scars from the fall and the drinking never left. But while Hank Jr. clawed his way back, another outlaw was spinning faster and falling harder, and this one drank with the fury of a man chasing ghosts across every stage in America. Number 15. Merle Haggard, the outlaw who tried to outrun his past with a bottle. Merle Haggard knew bars better than he knew bedrooms. Raised in the dust of Bakersfield and hardened by a prison stint in San Quentin, Merle wasn't just singing about heartache, he was drowning in it, one drink at a time. He started early, long before Mama Tried turned him into a legend. Merle was chasing shots in Oil Town bars, trying to forget the man he used to be. When he got out of prison in 1960, his first drink was a toast to freedom. But that one drink didn't stop. It turned into a routine, then a necessity. By the 1970s, Merle's tour bus wasn't just a mobile studio, it was a rolling saloon. Bottles of Crown Royal and cases of Coors lined the cabinets. The crew knew the drill. Don't bother waking Merle before noon unless the studio had whiskey waiting. He once said he drank to forget the outlaw he used to be. But the alcohol never let him forget, it just trapped him in that image longer. He performed like a man with nothing left to lose, and for a time he didn't. By the time he tried to stop in the 1990s, his liver was giving out, and most of his drinking buddies were already in the ground. Merle survived the bottle, but he never walked away from it clean. And while Merle slowed down, the next name cranked everything up. Louder amps, harder liquor, and a pace no human body could survive for long. Number 14. Waylon Jennings, the outlaw who made whiskey and chaos his religion. Waylon Jennings didn't sip whiskey, he swallowed it whole right alongside the stage lights, the roar of the crowd, and the crushing pressure of being country music's wildest outlaw. In the 1970s, Waylon wasn't just a star, he was a storm. Every night was a blur of roaring amps, rolled-up dollar bills, and bottomless bottles. He once joked his bloodstream was half outlaw, half proof. But behind the bravado was a man spinning wildly out of control. At his worst, Waylon was spending nearly $1,500 a day on substances. Whiskey was always on the menu, even if it wasn't the main course. Recording sessions at RCA didn't start until Waylon said so, and when they did, it was usually past midnight, soaked in bourbon and lined with coke. Road crews learned to hide the bottle if they wanted to finish the show. Friends learned to say nothing when his hands shook before picking up the guitar, because he still played like a man possessed, but the cost was piling up. By the early 80s, his body was giving out. His heart was racing, his liver screaming, and the addiction was no longer rock and roll. It was a death sentence. So he did the unthinkable. He quit, cold turkey. He sobered up not because he wanted to, but because he was terrified. One more night like the last, and he wouldn't wake up. Waylon made it out. But the next man? He barely got started before the bottle buried him. Up next, a smooth voice, a shattered promise, and a drink that took everything before the spotlight ever got a chance to shine. Number 13. Darren Norwood. The voice that faded before it ever reached its peak. Darren Norwood had a voice made for the spotlight, smooth, soulful, and built for country radio. Nashville saw a star, but the bottle saw him first. He once admitted to drinking 20 to 25 shots a night, tequila, whiskey, whatever was within reach. Before the show, during the show, after the show, club owners begged him to slow down. Bandmates watched helplessly as he unraveled. By his mid-30s, he wasn't just missing gigs, he was blacking out mid-song. His hit "Cowboys Don't Cry" became a cruel punchline, because Darren did cry, and then drank to make it stop. When his second album tanked in 1995, he walked away from the industry. He told people, "I wasn't losing fans, I was losing myself." He found sobriety for a while, sang in churches, mentored others. There was hope. But in 2015, Darren was found dead in his apartment. He was just 49, and once again, alcohol was in the picture. Quiet, familiar, final. He didn't die in a hotel room. He died in silence, with the voice of a star and the ending of a ghost. Next on the list, a man who didn't just drink like a legend, he drank like chaos made flesh. And when he showed up, bars didn't know whether to cheer or call the cops. Number 12. David Allan Coe, the redneck rock star who worshipped at the altar of whiskey. David Allan Coe didn't perform in bars, he belonged to them. Whiskey wasn't just his vice, it was his lifestyle, his personality, his fuel, and his shows, total madness. He'd walk on stage drunk out of his mind, curse out the crowd, then shut everyone up with a song so raw it felt like he was bleeding through the mic. Fans came for the spectacle, but behind the defiance was a man in freefall. Coe bragged he could outdrink George Jones, and no one doubted it. If there were bottles, he emptied them. If there weren't, he raised hell. Recording sessions became battles. In 1976, he nearly lost his record deal after showing up too drunk to stand. He'd ride his Harley bar to bar, collecting fights, arrests, and hangovers like souvenirs. Tour stops turned into war zones, and somehow he kept writing, kept playing. By the 2000s, his liver was gone, the fire was dimming. But ask anyone who saw him live, every bottle was a prayer, and every song was a last breath. But the next man didn't scream or rage. His drinking wasn't loud. It was slow, trembling, and quietly fatal. Number 11. Lefty Frizzell, the velvet voice that vanished in a bottle. Lefty Frizzell could sing circles around just about anyone in Nashville. In the early 1950s, he was a superstar. Smooth vocals, chart-topping hits, and the kind of swagger that made every jukebox feel personal. But behind that velvet voice was a man being slowly drowned by his own demons. He didn't need fame to start drinking, but fame certainly made it easier. Whiskey was there before the shows, after the sessions, and often right in the middle of both. And like so many others on this list, he wasn't drinking to party. He was drinking to disappear. His label begged him to get clean. Producers started canceling sessions. Friends said he'd forget lyrics mid-song, slurring through performances like he'd already checked out. One even said his voice sounded hungover, even when he wasn't. By the early 1960s, Lefty's career was in free fall. The man who once inspired legends like Willie Nelson and George Jones was now being arrested for public drunkenness and showing up to gigs too far gone to sing. He was barely in his 40s when the industry quietly turned away. In 1975, Lefty Frizzell died of massive organ failure at just 47 years old. The obituaries were short, the headlines were quiet, but his influence on country music, unshakable. He didn't go out in a blaze, he just faded. But the next name on our list didn't fade, he burned. His songs were beautiful, his soul was shattered, and the bottle was both muse and murderer. Number 10. Townes Van Zandt. The poet who let the bottle write his fate. Townes Van Zandt didn't drink to forget, he drank to feel, and then to stop feeling, and then to vanish altogether. With a voice that could melt glass and lyrics that cut like a blade, Townes was born to be a legend, but cursed to never survive it. Friends said he'd wake up shaking, grab a bottle of vodka before even speaking, and start writing through the tremors. Some of his best songs were composed while he was barely conscious, bleeding truth onto napkins in smoke-filled rooms. Diagnosed bipolar, he was offered medicine. He chose bourbon. He didn't live in mansions or headline stadiums. He lived in trailers, drank in dive bars, and sang with the ache of a man who never expected to grow old and didn't. He'd finish a fifth on stage and still hit every note of Poncho and Lefty. His fingers would bleed from playing, his voice would crack, and people would call it magic. But Townes knew it wasn't magic. It was survival. Barely. On New Year's Day 1997, Townes Van Zandt took his final breath with a blood alcohol level of 0.30%, nearly 4 times the legal limit. They say he smiled just before he died. His death wasn't loud, it wasn't scandalous, it was quiet, like the end of a long song no one wanted to stop. But if Townes drifted away with a whisper, the next man on our list was all chaos, all fire, and alcohol turned him from rising star to living cautionary tale before he ever had the chance to shine. Number 9. Ronnie Self, the rockabilly rebel who drank himself out of history. Ronnie Self had it all: the voice, the swagger, the smirk. In the late 1950s, Nashville thought it had found the next Elvis. But Ronnie didn't just burn bridges, he torched the entire highway with a bottle in one hand and a busted guitar in the other. He was brilliant, magnetic, unpredictable, and drunk almost every waking hour. Producers loved his sound but feared his presence. He'd show up to sessions already halfway through a bottle, bark at engineers, storm out mid-song, or worse, smash gear on stage in front of a stunned crowd. One night he chased his entire band off the stage in a whiskey-fueled rage. His breakout hit Bop Elena should have launched him into stardom. Instead, it marked the beginning of his spiral. As his behavior worsened, doors closed fast. By the mid-1960s, he was blacklisted by Nashville's biggest studios, banned from the Opry, and living in seedy motels, drinking mouthwash when the booze ran out. He once told a friend, "I was born to sing and drink, and I did both too much." And by the time he was 30, Ronnie Self's career was over. Not faded, not paused, over. No redemption arc, no comeback tour. Just a heartbreaking waste of thunderous talent, buried under broken bar stools and hangovers no one ever wrote down. But the next name didn't crash in his 30s. He wore black, drank deep, and somehow kept walking through a war zone of his own making. Until one night, even the man in black couldn't outrun what was chasing him. Number 8. Johnny Cash, the man in black. Drenched in darkness and whiskey, Johnny Cash wasn't just battling pills. The bottle had him too. And when both hit at once, it was like watching a slow-motion train wreck. During the 1960s, Cash was drinking a bottle of Jack Daniels a day, not to celebrate, to cope. The endless tours, the pressure, the identity crisis of being Johnny Cash when all he wanted was peace, it pushed him deeper into the bottle. June Carter found him passed out on bus floors, surrounded by broken bottles. Fans saw the swagger, the black suit, and the booming voice, but backstage, he was unraveling. In 1965, he was arrested trying to cross the border into Mexico, drunk and carrying amphetamines. Another time, he crashed his truck in the woods and nearly started a wildfire. 7 arrests in total, each one darker than the last. Cash once said, "I drank to kill the pain of being me." And for a while the pain was winning. Rehab didn't work the first time, or the second, but faith and June's relentless support slowly pulled him back. By the early 1970s, he was back on stage, sober, not healed, but surviving. He never claimed to conquer his demons, he just kept walking through them. But the next name never got that second chance. Her voice was pure. Her story, pure tragedy. Number 7. Mindy McCready, the modern tragedy that Nashville couldn't save. At just 21, Mindy McCready was everything Nashville could ask for. Blonde, bold, and burning with talent. Her debut album didn't just succeed, it exploded. 2 million copies sold. A household name overnight. But while the world clapped, Mindy was already sinking beneath the surface. Fame hit her like a freight train, and she had no armor for what followed. Failed relationships, industry pressure, custody battles, every heartbreak cut deeper. And the bottle became her first aid. What began as casual drinking turned into an all-consuming storm. She was downing vodka before noon, disappearing into blackouts, and waking up in hotel lobbies with police officers shaking her shoulders. Her blood alcohol levels reached near-lethal limits, over 0.3% more than once. She entered rehab more than 10 times. Each time she promised to change. Each time she relapsed. But the saddest part, behind every mugshot and every headline was a woman screaming for help, and no one knew how to catch her. In 2013, just weeks after her boyfriend died by suicide, Mindy walked out onto the same porch with a bottle in one hand and a loaded gun in the other. She didn't come back. She was 37 years old. And just like that, one of the brightest voices of the 90s was silenced forever. Not by scandal, not by sales, but by a battle she couldn't win. Coming up next is a man whose songs about heartbreak were more than lyrics. They were warnings. Because when the woman he loved died, the bottle didn't just comfort him, it took him too. Number 6. Gary Stewart, the king of honky-tonks, who drank his heart to death. Gary Stewart was the sound of heartbreak under neon lights. His voice cracked like a broken jukebox, trembling with pain and whiskey in every word. Songs like "She's Acting Single, I'm Drinking Doubles" weren't clever lines, they were his reality. He didn't just sing about drinking, he lived it. Gary would start the morning with bourbon, record through the haze, and end the night too drunk to remember it. Friends said his hotel rooms were chaos, bottles, ashtrays, his guitar somewhere in the mess. But out of that wreckage came music that cut deeper than most country stars could ever reach. The pain made him a star, but it also made him a prisoner. And when his wife Mary Lou passed in 2003, something broke. She had been his anchor. Without her, he shut the world out and turned the bottle back up like it was the only voice left. A week later, just 7 days, he was gone. They found Gary at home, dead by his own hand. Whiskey nearby, no note, no sound, just the end of a man who couldn't live without her, or without the liquor that had already taken most of his soul. He didn't die from obscurity or failure, he died from a heartbreak no song could fix. And next, a man whose drunken legacy is both hilarious and horrifying. A legend who rode a lawnmower to town when his car keys were taken. Because even the law couldn't stop George Jones from chasing his next drink. Number 5. George Jones, the legend who let the bottle steal his crown. George Jones wasn't just another country singer, he was country music. The voice that could break your heart with a single word, the charm that lit up every stage, and a bottle that followed him everywhere he went. By the mid-1970s, he was drinking nearly a quart of whiskey every day, every single day. If he wasn't on stage, he was on the floor, or in jail, or on his way to one of them. His fans loved him, but promoters started calling him No-Show Jones because he'd vanish hours before concerts, too drunk to stand, too far gone to care. One night, his wife Tammy Wynette hid the car keys, so he couldn't go buy more liquor. But George found a way. He climbed onto his lawnmower and rode it 8 miles down a Texas highway to the nearest bar. That image, the most famous man in country music driving a lawnmower for whiskey, became the symbol of his downfall. His friends tried to save him. Producers tried to hide it. But there's no hiding a man who drinks like he's trying to erase himself. By the end of the decade, George had lost his home, his voice, and almost his mind. Doctors warned he wouldn't make it to 50 if he didn't stop. And somehow, he did. In 1984, George Jones finally sobered up. It wasn't rehab or fear of death that saved him. It was music. He said he still heard the applause when he closed his eyes, and that was enough to pull him out of the fog. George Jones lived another 3 decades, but the ghost of the bottle never left him. He became a living legend, yes, but also a walking reminder of how even legends can fall. Coming up next is a man who drank until bullets started flying. He wasn't just drunk, he was dangerous, and one night, the whiskey made him pull the trigger. Number 4. Johnny Paycheck. The time bomb who took whiskey and rage on tour. Johnny Paycheck had a voice built for rebellion. Raw, gritty, and loud enough to rattle your soul. He sang like a man fed up with the world. And with every bottle he emptied, the edge in his voice got sharper, more dangerous. By the height of his fame in the late 70s, Paycheck was downing a fifth of whiskey before the encore and another one after. He'd stumble on stage half-lit, still somehow delivering his hits like "Take This Job and Shove It," with terrifying power. But off stage it was a different story. He didn't just drink to escape, he drank to destroy. He was arrested more than 10 times, mostly for public drunkenness, bar fights, and DUIs. But in 1985, it all went too far. In a bar in Ohio, after one too many shots and one too many insults, Paycheck pulled out a gun and shot a man in the head. Miraculously, the man survived. Paycheck claimed self-defense. The court didn't buy it. His blood alcohol level at the time, 0.28%. That's enough to knock most people unconscious. He was sentenced to prison and served almost 2 years behind bars. He came out older, quieter, and worn down. But even after prison, the bottle never fully let him go. He tried to joke about it. He once said, "I used to have a drinking problem, now it's just a memory." But the look in his eyes told a different story. He was a man who drank his way to fame, and then drank his way into a cell. But up next is the man who started it all, the original tragedy, a voice that built country music, and collapsed in the back seat of a Cadillac before he hit 30. Number 3. Hank Williams Sr. The original country tragedy, dead before 30. Hank Williams didn't just define country music, he defined the price of it. Fame, heartbreak, addiction, and a slow-motion fall that ended before the world was ready. He started drinking as a teenager, sneaking moonshine into his early gigs. By his 20s, he was rarely sober. He'd hide bottles in guitar cases, glove compartments, even under church pews. If there was a corner in the room, Hank had whiskey stashed there. Touring made everything worse. He was doing over 200 shows a year, with barely any sleep and constant pain from a spinal condition caused by a rodeo injury. The painkillers numbed his bones. The whiskey numbed everything else. He'd fall off stages, forget lyrics, slur through "Your Cheatin' Heart" like he didn't even recognize his own songs. Bandmates called it whiskey time. And the fans? They never stopped loving him, even when he stopped loving himself. By 1952, Hank was spiraling. He'd been fired from the Grand Ole Opry, dropped by his label, and divorced. His liver was swollen, his heart was weakening, and he looked decades older than he was. But he kept drinking, kept touring, kept pretending he was still Hank Williams, not just a broken man wearing his own legend like a mask. On New Year's Day 1953, Hank was found dead in the back seat of his blue Cadillac. He was 29 years old. Cause of death, a deadly mix of alcohol and morphine. His heart just stopped, quietly, like he'd finally had enough. But here's the haunting part. As the car rolled into West Virginia that morning, one of his records was still playing on the radio. Hank was gone, but his voice kept going. And if Hank built the myth of the tragic country star, the next man turned it into a lifelong public meltdown. One more outlaw, one more bottle, one more life slipping through Nashville's fingers. Number 2. Hank Thompson. The gentleman cowboy who let the whiskey win. Hank Thompson brought elegance to country music. polished suits, Western swing rhythms, and a voice smooth enough to cut through any jukebox haze. But behind the charm, the stage lights, and that easy Texas smile, Hank was drinking himself into a slow-motion collapse. He once said, "I never trusted a sober cowboy song," and he lived by that motto. From the late 1940s through the 70s, Thompson's tours were less about music and more about surviving the hangovers. Bandmates joked that if the bourbon didn't show up, neither would Hank. His buses were stocked like mobile saloons, and after each set, he didn't go to bed, he went back to the bar. The wild part, he made it all look easy. He'd walk on stage with a glass in hand, smile wide, and sing like nothing was wrong. But behind the curtain, his health was crumbling. By the 1970s, the effects of years of hard drinking started showing. Blackouts, missed gigs, heart issues. The voice was still there, but the man behind it was fading fast. His fans didn't notice at first. He hid it well, but those closest to him saw it all. The shaking hands, the fatigue, the hollow look in his eyes. In the 1980s, doctors finally gave him the warning. One more bender could kill you. And for once, Hank listened. He gave up the bottle. But when asked later if he'd finally beaten it, he just said, "I gave up the bottle, but it never gave me up." He died in 2007, respected, celebrated, and scarred. Not by scandal, but by decades of quiet self-destruction no one talked about. But if Hank Thompson lived to tell the tale, the next man didn't. The final name on our list is a tragedy so complete, it stunned the industry. A rising star with everything, taken down by one last drink. Number 1. Keith Whitley. The talent soaring to the top and sinking even faster. Keith Whitley had a voice that could stop time. Smooth, aching, and drenched in heartbreak. He sounded like a man who had lived 3 lifetimes by the time he hit his 20s. And in a way, he had. Raised in Kentucky honky-tonks, Keith started drinking before he was old enough to vote. By the time Nashville called, alcohol was already part of his bloodstream. He could out-sing just about anyone in town and out-drink them too. When Don't Close Your Eyes hit number 1, Keith should have been on top of the world. But behind closed doors, he was already slipping away. He would drink an entire bottle of vodka before noon, then chase it with beers through the afternoon. Yet when he hit the stage, perfection. Nobody saw the tremble in his hands or the damage in his eyes, just the magic in his voice. He told his wife, country star Lori Morgan, "I'm just having one." But everyone who knew Keith also knew there was no such thing as just one. On May 9, 1989, she left the house to run errands. By the time she came home, Keith was gone. The toxicology report revealed a blood alcohol level of 0.47%, nearly 6 times the legal limit. It wasn't just fatal, it was unthinkable. Doctors said no one should have been conscious at that level, let alone walking. But Keith had lived much of his adult life that way, balanced on a razor's edge between brilliance and oblivion. He was only 33 years old. His career was exploding, his voice was timeless, and still the bottle won. Keith Whitley didn't die from fame, pressure, or failure. He died from one more drink. And in doing so, he closed the darkest circle in country music, the same one opened by Hank Williams Sr. decades before. Proof that talent doesn't protect you from the bottle. Sometimes, it just hides the pain better. They sang about heartbreak, and they lived it twice as hard. They gave country music its soul and lost their own in the process. Some found redemption. Most didn't. And the bottle? It never blinked. It never forgave. These weren't just country stars, they were walking tragedies set to music. So if this list hit you hard, it was meant to. Hit that like button to honor the ones we lost. Subscribe if you want the truth behind the legends they don't teach in music history. And turn on that bell, because the next story might be even darker. You've been watching the real side of country music. And we're just getting started.